when my mother was 15 years old, my daddy came to visit, and he knew about her being there. So he came with a box of dates, and he had already talked to her mother and dad, and so he went to see my mother. Her name was Handumi. And when he told her, he says, Handumi, I brought you some dates. He says, I want you to taste them and see if you like them. So she tasted them and she said, oh, they're delicious. So she says, I like them very much. So he looked at her mother and father, and her mother said to her, Handumi, you are engaged. You're going to marry him. His name is Bolus. Bolus, or Bolus. In English, that means Paul. So she didn't know. What? She says, I didn't know. All I did was eat the dates. She says, but you're engaged. 15 years old, my mother was engaged to get married. And so they got married in Lebanon. And they lived there for a while. And they had these children before he left and came to America. And that's why he came first. And then she came afterwards.
Okay. That makes sense.
That's the story of how they got married.
So you said he went to Georgia, but she had to go to Ellis Island and travel down.
Yeah, well, he came through the same way.
Oh, okay.
He had to. Everybody came through Ellis Island in those days. Now, the story of Sam's mother and father, they didn't go through Ellis Island. They came around and came through Mexico. So they didn't go through customs like my mother and father did. And they landed in Mexico, and they crossed the border at El Paso. They were also from Zahli, and this is where my mother and father were from, Zahli, Lebanon. Zahli, everybody knows about Zahli. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. Daddy came to America first because he had a brother that lived in Valdosta. And then he had my mother come over to America by herself with, I think there was a cousin or somebody or an aunt that came with her, and came on the boat. And you know how long it takes to come on a boat in those days. And she landed in Ellis Island just like he did and went through the customs. And if you were sick, they wouldn't let you come in. They made you go back. But she was okay, so she came back and went to New York, and she was with this lady, and she bought little trinkets or something. So they went on their way coming down the coast. They were selling things to people. She was peddling as she came along. And I don't really know how they got down the coast, if Daddy went up there to get her, or if one of the uncles went up there to get her, or what. But that's how she did. And they came down. They lived in Valdosta for a while until he built and bought land in Griffin, Georgia. He bought land that was right along the railroad tracks, and it was where the city was, and he built a hotel. It was a big building. Downstairs was to sell things with, like clothing.
General merchandise.
General merchandise. And then there was a stairway that goes upstairs, and they all lived upstairs. All my brothers and sisters grew up in the hotel. I wasn't born there. I was still not there. And Joe used to tell stories about how he would go up the street and slide down this bank and play, and how they played in the area. And the people that were traveling on the train, if they needed to stop and go to another city or change trains, they would spend the night in the hotel. And this is how my mother and father made money in those days. So, but they had the building downstairs that they rented out, and then they finally came down and they took over the garment store, sold all kinds of clothing, and he built the house two or three blocks down the street. He bought the other property where my house was. You don't have a picture of the house. 2-story house, beautiful home. My daddy took the gold bracelets that my mother had, and he invested. He wanted to buy property, so he went to Florida, way down in Florida, And he never saw what it looked like, but he was writing to somebody, and he gave him the gold bracelets to buy some land in Florida, and he found out when he went down there that it was swamp. It was underwater. There was no way you could build or live on it.
So he bought it and then he found that out?
Yeah. After he bought it, he went down to see what he bought, and he found out that it was swamp land, and it made everybody so mad because he used her gold bracelets. We never got to see those. When I was born, Daddy had already built the house, this house that we're living in over there, and I was born in the front bedroom, right here on this side of the house, in the front of the house, and they had a doctor for me. I'm the baby of 11. She had more than that. There were 4 children that she had. Between me and Margaret, there was a miscarriage, so that's 1.
Yeah.
And then when my older brother and sisters were born, before they were born, there were 3 other children that died. She had children when she was leaving Lebanon, and they died. There were 3 children, but before they came here. Can you see all my family here? This is the picture that my daddy got a photographer to come. Actually, we have another one when I was only 6 years old. We don't have a copy of that right now. But we're sitting the same way we're sitting now. This is me, and this is Catherine, Margaret, Mary, Norman, Tufi, Fifi, Fido, Philip, Gigi, and Joe. Tufi and Joe are doctors. Okay? This is when I was about 16 or 17 years old. And we're sitting in front of the house that my daddy built. I came to California in 1945. And I came to come out here to work with my brother Joe. I was working with Tufi, and he gave me some money one day, and he says, "You're going to California because you're not going to meet anybody in Griffin, Georgia." So he sent me to California to stay with my brother Joe, and I worked in his clinic, and I gave injections, muscular injections. I set up the patients. I did his typing for industrial patients, and I really enjoyed working with him. And then I was going to the Melkite Church. It was on Hoover Street, and I'm meeting the Nasani family, and I'm meeting other people that there was a club that they formed of all the different churches that we had here, the Melkite, Maronite, Orthodox, and Catholic Church. Everybody belonged to those churches that were Arabic, went to this meeting, and every weekend on Friday we would go on Western Avenue upstairs to the big room where we had a meeting, a very formal meeting, and then we danced and we socialized. So this is where I met Sam. But before I met Sam, I knew Jimmy George. And Jimmy George, all he ever did was want to take me out to see a movie and buy a hamburger, and that was it. Nothing serious. So I'm sitting at this meeting, at the club meeting, I'm sitting next to Jimmy George, and Sam comes over, and he introduces himself and asked to dance with me, and I danced with him. And so that was it. And then every meeting we'd have, he'd be sociable with me, and he asked me for a date. So I says, okay. He said, Sunday I'm going to come over and pick you up at 5 o'clock, and I want you to be home. I was living in an apartment on Westmoreland. And so it just so happened that Sunday, this Italian man upstairs named DeLucia, he says, Lucille, I've got to go to Oxnard and take my brother home. Please come and ride with me so I can have somebody to come back home with. So I told him, I says, I have to be home by 5 o'clock. Oh, I'll get you home by 5 o'clock, he said. So I says, all right, you promise. So he took me with him. I went for a ride, and we're coming back, and the traffic was like this, bumper to bumper. And we had a hard time getting home before 5 o'clock. So by the time I got home, it was a little bit after 5, I don't know, about 5:30, and I'm waiting for Sam. and he didn't come, and he didn't call. So I called his number, and Phyllis answered the phone. Phyllis was 12 years old. And I said, Phyllis, is Sam there? And she says, no, because he told her, you tell her no. I says, well, I just want to apologize that I wasn't here. I went up to Oxnard with this friend, and I didn't get back in time, and I wanted to let him know. So he never had anything to say, so we had another club meeting every weekend. Every Friday we go to this club meeting and we meet. And I'm sitting next to him at Jimmy George, and Sam comes over, and I'm telling Jimmy, I says, you know, I says, Sam thinks I stood him up because I wasn't at home for a date. Oh, that just about blew his mind. He never had a girl stand him up, and that just blew him away. So anyway, he asked me to dance again, and then he said, there's a picnic that's going to be up in Sunland. He says, I want to take you to it. And he said, it's another club. I says, okay. So he picked me up, me and Jimmy George. He had Jimmy George with me in the back seat, and Sam was in the front seat with some American girl that he knew. And we went up to Sunland to a picnic, and we're sitting on the ground, and everybody went to go play ball. Even Jimmy went, and everybody left me and Sam there, laying on this great big sheet or whatever it was on the ground under the tree. And Sam said that he had reached over to grab my hand, and I had moved it, and I didn't realize that until later. But anyway, we're sitting there, and all of a sudden the crowd came back, and somebody had a camera. So he says to somebody, he says, take a picture of this. And he picked me up, and he hauled me up so that I could reach the tree. And I'm reaching for the tree, and somebody's got that picture, and I don't know where it is. But anyway, after that, he started calling me every night when he came home from work, and I had come home from work too, and I was in my apartment. He would call, and he would talk to me from 8 o'clock until almost midnight to make sure that I didn't get on the phone with anybody else. He was so jealous of me every night. And we went on all kinds of excursions with different clubs. We went to the beach, and we went on picnics. We went up to the mountains. We went to the snow. We did a lot of things together. And there was a whole group of people that liked to go hiking at Griffith Park, and we used to go hiking up there. And then when we go back to my apartment, which was only the bed came out of the wall, and had no kitchen, so they wanted coffee, and they bought donuts, so they wanted coffee, so we made coffee in the bathroom. But I had a hot plate to cook. So we're sitting around and singing, having a good time with all these kids that are from the club that went hiking with us. And then all of a sudden, Joe wanted me to go with him to this house up in Beverly Hills, this very wealthy man that had a great big Buddha. And this Buddha had a big stomach on it. And the man told me, he says, you rub that Buddha's stomach 3 times and you make a wish and it'll come true. So I'm rubbing that stomach. I'm saying, I want to live in California. I want to stay in California. I want to stay in California. So then Joe was talking to this man, and Florence was there, and Sam was there, and he's telling everybody, he says, I'm going to send Lucille back to Georgia. He says, I can't handle her. She's too much for me to keep contact with her. She's always doing this and doing that and going places. I'm going to send her back to Georgia. Sam heard that. So he went home, and it wasn't the next day he came to the apartment, and he had a ring. He says, Lucille, he says, I want to marry you. And I says, oh boy. That was it. Man, I put that ring on, and I was so happy. I was so happy, couldn't believe it. So he told Joe that he wanted to marry me, and that made Joe happy because he was getting tired of watching me. I think I was a little bit rambunctious. We got married in Griffin, Georgia. I traveled by plane and he came by car with Albert Ashcar. Drove across and brought the car with a big box of apples so that when we went on our honeymoon we'd have something to eat. Sam and I went down Florida, all the way down to Key West, Florida, on our honeymoon. And we flew in a little airplane to Cuba. We went to Havana, Cuba for 3 days. And we had a real good time over there. Sam could speak the language beautifully. And he would throw money for the little children to come and eat, grab the money and run. They followed us everywhere we went. And we went on a tour all over Havana and saw everything there. And then we went into one place that was a rum factory. And when we went in, there was a whole table, long table, and it had bottles of rum on there. And they wanted to know, which one did I want? So I says, I want some of that one, and that one, and that one, and that one. And they made me a daiquiri out of each one of them. Ooh, did I feel good. So when Sam and I, he was drinking too. When we came out of there, as soon as we walked out the door, there was this great big barrel thing this man had there, and he had tamales in it. And Sam bought tamales for me and him, and we ate them, and that was the best tamale I ever had. Man, it was good. So anyway, we toured and went to the nightclubs in Havana and stayed there 3 days and 3 nights, and enjoyed it so much. And then we flew back by airplane to Key West. And before we landed in Key West, they sprayed the airplane, and it looked like fog in there. And I'm saying, what are you doing? And they says, we got to kill the bugs before you go back to America. So that's how they sprayed us, to make sure no insects were coming back in. So anyway, we had our car in Key West, and we drove back up the other side of Florida, and we ate lobster. Oh, Sam was he wanted lobster. Everywhere we went, we would eat lobster and lobster and lobster. Anyway, we drove all the way back up, went back to Griffin, Georgia, and we stayed there for a few days, and Sam saw in the newspaper that they were advertising tape recorders. Wire recorders, not tape, wire recorders. So he went to Atlanta, and he took my daddy with him, and they went shopping, and they got the wire recorder, and they came back, and we got my mother and my father to talk about their experiences in Lebanon and coming here, and it's all on those wire recorders, which we can't even hear today because those wire recorders wore out. But it was just a spool like this. And got my mother and father to talk on them, which was very good. And then after we visited and loaded up my car with all the wedding gifts, we drove back across the United States and came back to California. And all the way going on, we still had those apples. He had a whole crate of apples in the car. And we eating apples and stopping on the road and spending the night and going swimming, and then keep going and keep going and keep going. And so we came all the way back to California, and we stayed with Sam's mother in her house on Roswell Street. And I think we lived with her for about 2.5 years until we built our house up on Thurber Place. Sam bought the property up there. And Judy was born, and Sam's mother would not let me give my baby a bath. She pushed me to one side and she says, I'm going to do it. And she would bathe Judy in the kitchen sink, in her kitchen, great big wide sink, and took care of her and bathed her and played with her, and she wouldn't let me touch her. And then 16 months later, I had Raymond. 16 months later, I had Raymond. So I'm having Raymond, and he's a big baby. He was in the bedroom one time, and Mary Ann Ashcar, she's Mary Ann Bello now, she came in one day, and she thought that she had to take care of that baby. She got the can of baby powder, and she poured it all over his face. Poor Raymond, he's over there with all that stuff on his face, just a baby, and they crying. So they went in there and took care of him anyway. So we stayed with her until we got our house built up on the hill. We built a beautiful home up on Thurber Place. It was only a 2-bedroom house, cost $10,000 to build it. And Sam had a government loan, which only asked us for $43 a month to pay for the mortgage on it. So we did real good doing that. And he was working at the wholesale market. Sam would leave every morning and go to the wholesale market early in the morning. We had milk delivered to the house. And Sam came home one time, and the milkman was inside the kitchen. He didn't like that. He stopped that milkman. Sam was very jealous of anybody that showed me any face. And I says, why are you doing that? I says, well, how are we going to get the milk? He says, I'll bring it home. So the milkman didn't get to come up there anymore.